I still remember the day I found out about the wedding. Not because it was supposed to be a special day for my family, but because it was the day I finally realized how invisible I'd become to them. My name is Maya Carter, and for most of my life, I believed that family was everything. That no matter what happened, blood would always mean something. But that illusion shattered like glass the moment I saw the photos, the engagement pictures of my sister, Emma, smiling next to her fiancé, surrounded by people I grew up with, and not a single word from her to me. I wasn't invited. Not a call. Not even a message. Just silence, the kind that cuts deeper than any words ever could. I sat in my office that morning, staring at my computer screen, frozen. My phone kept buzzing with notifications, mutual friends posting congratulations, pictures, captions about how perfect they looked together. I kept scrolling even though every picture felt like a punch to my chest. I hadn't spoken to Emma in 2 years, but a part of me always believed that when her big day came, she'd reach out. She was my little sister, my best friend once upon a time. We used to stay up all night talking about our dream weddings, promising to be each other's maid of honor. But that promise had turned into a memory she'd chosen to erase. And the cruelest part? The wedding was happening at my hotel. The one I'd built from scratch after years of struggle, tears, and betrayal. The place that had become my pride, my survival, my second home. The Silver Leaf Grand Hotel. I found out purely by accident. The events manager brought a new booking file to my desk that morning, saying, "We just confirmed a full package wedding for next month." The clients requested privacy and special handling. Seems like a high-profile family. I smiled faintly, nodding, flipping through the papers. And then my eyes froze on the names written in bold, Emma Carter and Daniel Hayes. My heart stopped. My throat went dry. I felt my hand tremble as I gripped the paper tighter, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. My own sister had booked her wedding in my hotel and hadn't even told me. I wanted to laugh, cry, scream, maybe all three. But I didn't. I just sat there staring at the paper, feeling something inside me twist and break in a way I hadn't felt in years. For a moment, I thought it had to be a mistake. Maybe the manager got the name wrong. Maybe it was another Emma Carter. But deep down I knew. Because only my sister would request privacy like that. She'd want to make sure I didn't find out. And she'd done it perfectly. The manager kept talking about decorations, guest lists, and catering choices, but I didn't hear a word. My mind was spinning, memories flooding back like old wounds reopening. The last time I saw Emma was the night I walked out of our parents' house. It was after a fight that changed everything. She had accused me of betraying her, of stealing an opportunity that was meant for her. But she never understood that I worked for it, that I sacrificed everything for it. Instead of talking, she turned everyone against me, even Mom and Dad, and I, out of pride and pain, left. I built my life alone, brick by brick, hotel by hotel. I didn't look back. Until that moment, holding her wedding booking in my hands, I realized how deep her hatred must still run. I tried to focus on my breathing. In and out, but my chest was tight. A part of me wanted to cancel the event right then and there, to call her and say, "Not here." not under my roof. But another part of me, the colder, quieter part that had grown stronger over the years, whispered something else. No, Maya, don't cancel it. Let it happen. Let her walk into your world without even knowing it. Let her look around and feel proud of what she's built, only to realize it was you who made it all possible. That thought sparked something inside me. A flicker of revenge, maybe. Or maybe just justice. I wasn't sure yet. All I knew was that fate had handed me a strange kind of gift, and I wasn't about to waste it. That night, as I walked through the empty halls of the hotel, the chandeliers reflected in the marble floors like shattered stars. Every corner of this place held a piece of my story, the sweat, the sleepless nights, the silent tears. And soon it would hold the story of the sister who had erased me. I stopped near the ballroom, the one they'd chosen for the ceremony. The air felt heavy, almost mocking. I could almost hear her laughter echoing in the distance, like it used to when we were kids playing pretend weddings with flowers from our mother's garden. Only now it was real, and I wasn't part of it. I closed my eyes and whispered to myself, "You wanted to erase me, Emma, but I'm still here. And this time, you'll see me whether you want to or not." I told myself I was only going to observe, that I would sit quietly behind the scenes and learn everything I could about the people who had erased me. But that night, when I walked around the ballroom alone, touching the polished rail, listening to the hollow echo of my footsteps, I realized observation was not enough. There was too much history in these walls, memories of clients who laughed and cried, of midnight phone calls, of promises I had kept when no one else could. The idea of letting Emma walk through those doors as if she had no part in my story felt like a betrayal to myself. I sat at my desk and opened the guest file she had signed. Dates, special requests, a note from her planner about no family drama, strict guest list, discreet check-in. My hands trembled as I read her vows drafts they had attached for the ceremony playlist. The songs she said would define us. It hurt to see words she once shared with me in our kitchen at midnight, now typed and privately owned. I thought of our last night together, the shattered argument, the slammed door, her face full of accusations I couldn't refute because I was ashamed of how my choices had been painted as betrayal. But shame had turned into fuel. I decided then that I would not ruin her day in front of her guests. I would not make her cry in public. That was not my revenge. My revenge, if it had to be called that, would be smarter. It would be subtle like winter frost, unseen until it left something ruined. I spent the next days moving through the hotel like a ghost with a purpose. I let the staff think I was consumed by the usual leadership tasks, vendor meetings, staff schedules, inventory checks, while I quietly pried. I reviewed the security logs, not to expose them at the ceremony, but to know who would arrive when. I read the seating charts to see who she trusted. I called the florist under the pretense of a quality check, praising the arrangements for their delicate choice, persuading them to add one small, unique bloom, a white peony she loved as a child, to every bouquet. I adjusted lighting cues and rehearsal notes so the ballroom's golden hour would fall a little later, longer, giving the cameras soft light that made faces honest. I did things that only someone who owned the place could do. I whispered suggestions to the head chef about serving a surprise dessert named after our mother's recipe, a subtle memory that would catch her off guard. Each small action was both a reminder and a claim. I wanted her to feel the presence of the house she had chosen as hers, to sense that even if she tried to erase me, my fingerprints were everywhere. People asked me if I'd be estranged at the wedding, if I'd step in, and each time I gave them the same soft answer, "I'll be around, helping the team." No one pressed. People rarely press when they think a wound has healed. At night, I found myself in the rooftop garden where, as a teenager, Emma and I used to share secrets under the stars. I found one of her childhood drawings still taped in a back office drawer, a paper crown drawn in crayon labeled Queen Emma. I laughed, a sound that felt like breaking glass. I asked the night sky for permission to be angry and for a plan that didn't make me small. The first crack in my control came when our mother called. Her voice on the phone was soft, cluttered with guilt. "Maya," she said, "I know you feel hurt." I held the phone and wanted to tell her everything, the solitude, the nights I cried into my pillow, the way I had built this hotel so my name could mean something more than a rumor. But I didn't. Instead, I let her spill apologies that fell like rain, thin, not quite enough. I hung up feeling lighter and strangely hollow at the same time. The day the guest list was finalized, I discovered a name I did not expect, Daniel Hayes. He was not just Emma's fiancé. He was someone I had known in passing, a man who'd once stood between us in a dinner conversation about inheritance and promises. The file showed messages between Emma and Daniel where she said she wanted a wedding where old wounds stayed buried. She had written that she did not want family surprises. She did not want me. That line stabbed like a needle. I held the booking sheet to the light and felt the paper grow heavier with meaning. I could have taken the dramatic route, call the planner, expose the truth, watch her face crumble when she realized how wrong she'd been. But I had learned that loud victories are short-lived. They allow people to say you overreacted, that you sought revenge for revenge's sake. I wanted something cleaner. I wanted her to face a quiet truth, that the life she thought she had severed from me was still connected by the very place she chose to celebrate. So I set a plan in motion that had nothing to do with sabotage and everything to do with exposure, exposure in its truest sense. I would unmask the small, hidden ways she had built her new life by walking around the ruins of our past. And I would do it gently enough that her laugh at the ceremony would taste bitter when she realized where it had come from. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a study in control and pretense. The staff saw a CEO steering a big event with grace. My heart kept a ledger of smaller secret entries. I watched Emma's planner come and go, her hair bright, her words clipped. She walked the halls once with a camera crew testing angles, unaware she was being photographed by someone who knew the building like the lines on her palm. I told myself the goal was to remind her and perhaps, in a sliver of hope, to open a door where reconciliation could slip through. But every time I imagined reconciling, I saw the disappointed look on her face from that night 2 years ago. The one that had said, "You were never meant to succeed without us." The one that had convinced our family that I was a traitor. That look had not faded. It lived in her eyes even now when she studied the ballroom's layout. I started to notice other things. Her guests were mostly people from the old neighborhood, people who remembered the way our parents argued, who had been witnesses to childhood fights. Her bridesmaids were women who whispered in corners, and one of them, Claire, kept glancing toward the staff entrance as if waiting for someone she knew. That sparked a memory. Claire and I had once shared a late-night conversation about responsibility, about choosing life over loyalty. I found Claire in the staff corridor and asked her gently about Emma. She hesitated, then said something I already suspected. Emma had been hurt deeply when I left, and some people never forgave me for taking a chance instead of staying in a safer, smaller life. I felt the ache of history like an old scar, but rather than feed it, I let it harden into strategy. I wanted Emma to feel how small choices build a life, and how much of ours had been constructed from choices I had made too. I asked the IT manager to make sure the wedding slideshow had a gap where my own fundraising gala photos had once played, a gap that would be filled by a single, unexpected throwback photo, the two of us as children, covered in cake, laughing. It was the kind of photo Emma loved but had kept hidden since the fight. I also arranged quietly for the concierge to hand a mothballed key card to one of our old neighbors, a woman named Mrs. Patel, whom Emma had always adored. I wanted moments of memory, not chaos. When Emma arrived at the hotel a week before the wedding for the pre-ceremony meeting, she walked past me in the lobby without seeing me. She was radiant, a light that belonged to someone else now. My first instinct was to step forward, to touch her arm and say, "Emma," but my throat closed. Instead, I watched from the corner as she laughed with friends, hearing the cadence of a life that had continued without me. I thought of confronting her in that moment, of saying the things that had been lodged in my chest for years. But confrontation had a way of making me smaller. Quiet reminders, I decided, would have a longer reach. The night before the rehearsal dinner, I found a moment alone in the kitchen with the head chef. I asked him to cook a small family dish, the stew our mother made when we were sick. The one Emma always complained was too spicy but kept eating anyway. The chef looked puzzled. "Why would you want that?" he asked softly. I told him, because traditions are worth honoring, even if we fight over them. He nodded, but I could tell he sensed something deeper. When the rehearsal dinner began, the aroma moved through the guests unnoticed, and I watched Emma pause mid-sentence, her face folding into a memory she tried to keep from public view. For a minute, in a crowded room, I saw a girl who still tasted our mother's cooking, and not a bride in a silk dress. That tiny fracture made me ache with a complicated tenderness. Was I happy? Part of me was. I had planted small truths inside their celebrations like seeds. But another part of me, the part that had been hurt, wanted to see the consequences of their choices in a way that would make them understand the harm. I held my breath and waited for that understanding to grow. Rehearsal night brought a fragile calm, with bands tuning and last-minute fittings, everyone pretending the future would go exactly as planned. I walked past tables topped with place cards in elegant calligraphy, each one a small declaration of belonging. There was my mother's name at a table I did not expect her to take. I thought about approaching her, but she seemed far away, caught between pride and regret. The lighting designer had done as I requested, longer golden light in the ballroom, and as Emma practiced the walk with her father, it hit me how ordinary acts can carry enormous weight. I wanted to interrupt the ceremony and tell the room everything, but I knew that shouting truth across a crowd only turns truths into gossip. Instead, I arranged for a quiet intervention, a recorded message to play during the reception, one that would not accuse but would remind. I asked the wedding videographer, under the guise of offering extra footage, to include an unlisted clip of old family footage I had found in an archive, a simple home video of our family at the beach, together, smiling and messy. I paid for it with a small smile, feeling like a thief stealing back a piece of my life. On the night of the rehearsal, the footage played in a dim corner where guests didn't pay attention, but Claire saw it and stopped. She sat down, eyes glossy. I watched her watch our past and felt something inside her change. Later, Claire approached me quietly and said, "I never knew." Those 2 words were an opening I hadn't expected. I told her nothing, only that everyone's story is more complicated than it looks. She nodded, and for the first time, I felt a thread of alliance forming where there had been only distance. The next morning, the day of the wedding, the hotel hummed with the nervous energy of final touches. Staff moved like silent conductors, ensuring the symphony would play true. I stood in the manager's office watching monitors, a kind of voyeurism that felt shameful and necessary. I thought of calling Emma, leaving a message, sending a note begging for a meeting. But my hands stayed still. It felt like a battle between the woman who wanted vindication and the woman who wanted reconciliation. At 11, the bride's party began to arrive. I watched their faces on the camera feed, laughter, strained smiles, moments of private worry flashing across their features. Then, the moment I feared and expected, Emma paused in the mirror, smoothing the front of her dress, and for a second she looked like the little sister who used to braid my hair. She spoke into the room as if to herself, "I hope they don't see through this." The sentence landed like a stone. My head snapped up. Through the monitor, I could see doubt, as if there was a hole in her armor she could not mend. That tiny admission made the plan I had been shaping feel both cruel and merciful. The ceremony began with a hush so complete you could hear a dropped pin. Friends and family took their seats, the soft murmur of anticipation rising like a tide. I sat in the back of a small utility room instead of the audience, watching the live stream feed through the manager's tablet, feeling the irony of watching my sister get married in my own house like a private show. She walked down the aisle with a confidence that made my chest ache. The pianist played the same intro I had heard at my own reception years ago, and the sound made the edges of my memory blur. I had told the photographer to let one image go out, a single candid of Emma's expression as she first saw Daniel at the altar. It was a small tribute to the past, a way to let truth breathe without making it smell like accusation. The ceremony went on, vows exchanged in soft whispers. But each time Emma smiled toward the crowd, I felt a tension ripple through me, a question of whether this was the joy she wanted or the joy she had learned to show. During the reception, the videographer played the home video clip in a quiet corner where people could watch if they chose. Emma wandered over with a glass of champagne and stopped dead when the frames flickered with images of our childhood, double-decker sandwiches, scraped knees, and our mother teaching us to fold clothes properly. I watched her face on the screen and then live in the room, and something inside her shifted. She seemed to search around as if trying to find who had arranged for that footage to be there. She never looked toward the utility room where I sat. My plan wasn't to ambush her with memory. It was to make memory unavoidable. The reception brimmed with energy. Speeches began, each one carefully curated to paint a picture of unity and bliss. When it was our father's turn, his voice trembled across the microphone, not from anger, but from an attempt at composure. He told small anecdotes about both of us, stories I had thought were forgotten. He spoke of laughter in the kitchen and arguments that ended in silly apologies, and for the first time, I saw his remorse. I felt sympathy. It surprised me how quickly sympathy mingled with the thirst for a deeper statement. After the cake was cut and the first dance played, I slipped away to the back hall where the staff congregated. Claire met my eyes and handed me a folded note. She asked me to give this to you if she ever needed to find you, she said. My hands closed around it, and for a moment I felt the world tilt. Inside was a small scrap of paper with handwriting I recognized. Emma's note from years ago, when we promised to protect each other. The note had been hidden for a reason I didn't know, and seeing it now felt like fate tossing me a lifeline. I left the rejoicing room and went up to the rooftop garden where, under the string lights, Emma had once told me secrets about boys and dreams. I waited until the end of the night when the guests thinned and the hotel seemed to breathe a tired sigh. I thought I might see her in the driveway, perhaps flustered, radiant, on her way to the next chapter. Instead, I found a trail of small, quiet moments. A discarded boutonniere on a bench. A napkin with lipstick. The world around me felt both familiar and utterly strange. I dialed her number and let it ring twice. No answer. I left a voice message that was short and careful. Emma, it's Maya. I saw the video. Call me when you're ready. I didn't expect a call. I didn't expect anything. I just wanted the circle to be open. The next morning was gentle and strangely ordinary. The hotel smelled of coffee and the aftermath of celebration, petals crushed in corners, tiny crumbs behind chairs. Emma sent a short text. Thank you for the help. The team was great. It was polite, neutral, like a curtain between us. My chest ached at its coolness. But then a second message came, longer and rawer. Mom gave me something. I saw an old note. I don't understand some things. Can we meet? My hands went cold. The meeting was not a confrontation. It was an invitation to step into a space where truth could be spoken without an audience. We chose a small cafe adjacent to the hotel where the noise masked the tremor in both our voices. When she arrived, she looked smaller than she had at the altar, as if the weight of a new life had settled on her shoulders. I wanted to reach across the table and say everything, apologize, accuse, explain. But neither of us began with the loud confessions I had rehearsed in my head. Instead, we shared small things first, awkwardly unpacking the last 24 hours like strangers comparing souvenirs. She told me about Daniel and how he had coaxed her out of stubbornness. She said she'd been afraid of the family fractures and wanted a day when everything felt whole. I listened, and as she spoke, I watched the honesty in her words uncurl. Then she said something that made the air between us thin. I didn't invite you because I was ashamed of how easily people believed the worst about you. The sentence landed like a stone. She confessed that she had been hurt by the past and that her choice to exclude me was born of fear rather than malice. She thought by excluding me she could avoid old arguments, prevent old secrets from resurfacing. Hearing it was worse than being pushed away. It was being reduced to a rumor in her mind. My reaction surprised me. I didn't tear into her. I breathed, then explained, in the simplest language I could, why I left, what I had built, and how hard it had been to keep going when everyone I loved believed I had betrayed them. I told her about nights without sleep, about signing the first mortgage alone, about the small victories that tasted like ashes because they had no one to share them with. Her eyes filled at parts, then narrowed at others, working to stitch together a sister she had once dismissed. She reached across the table and touched my hand, the gesture fragile and earnest. "I thought you chose to leave us," she whispered. "I thought you left me." I wanted to say I didn't leave you. I left to find myself, but words felt clumsy. The note from Claire and the home videos had pried a small crack open, and now, with 2 cups of coffee cooling between us, we began a conversation I'd been waiting years for. We spoke for hours about guilt and pride and the ways people rewrite their stories to suit the life they want. She told me how Daniel had been patient, how he'd shown her a version of the future that looked safe. I told her about how safe had once meant small to me and how I couldn't go back. We did not fix everything that day. Rebuilding is not a single meeting. It is 1,000 small acts of trust. But we planted seed words, apologies that were honest, not theatrical, and recollections that were offered without accusation. When we hugged at the end, it felt tentative but real. I walked back to the hotel with a new awareness. The wedding had not ended in public shame. It had ended in a private opening. My plan for revenge had evolved into something else, not punishment, but reclamation. I realized I wanted her to see me not as a threat, but as a person who had survived and could be trusted to stand beside her, not behind her or erased from view. The moral of the moment was not about winning or losing. It was about how the architecture of a life, the building you create, the hotel you open, the decisions you make, can become a place of reunion if you leave the doors unlocked. If you want me to continue, I will write the next sections that move into the deeper confrontation with our father. The reveal of a business scandal that ties into the family feud, Emma's moment of reckoning at a private unveiling in the hotel that tests loyalties, and the final moral resolution where justice, not vengeance, takes the stage. Asterisk, asterisk. When Emma left the cafe that afternoon, I sat there long after she was gone, staring at the steam rising from my coffee like it carried every unanswered question I had ever asked. The conversation had ended softly, not like a door slamming shut, but like one left slightly ajar. I wanted to feel relief, and maybe I did, in fragments. But mostly, I felt a heavy quiet, the kind that sits in your bones. The truth had begun to surface, but it wasn't finished. Deep down, I knew there was still something buried underneath all this guilt and misunderstanding. Something that had poisoned our family long before Emma and I ever fought. I walked back to the hotel, my heels echoing against the marble floor like a metronome for my thoughts. The lobby was calm again. The wedding decorations had been taken down, replaced by the usual polished calm of business meetings and tourists checking in. The normalcy felt strange, almost artificial. As I passed the reception desk, one of my managers, Grace, stopped me. "Miss Carter, there's something you might want to see," she said, handing me a folder. It was found in one of the suites this morning. The groom's suite. I frowned, opening it. Inside were documents, contracts, old business emails, and a few legal letters addressed to my father. My breath caught when I saw the date, 2 years ago, the same time I had left home. My father's name was on every page, along with a company name I hadn't seen since the fight, Carter Holdings. It was the family company I had walked away from when they accused me of betraying them. My heart pounded. I skimmed the papers and saw numbers, figures, transfers that didn't make sense. Then one sentence jumped out, asterisk, transfer of hotel ownership rights contingent on non-disclosure to Maya Carter. I froze. My hotel, the Silver Leaf, my own hotel, had been tied to a hidden clause I never knew about. My chest tightened as realization set in. Someone had once tried to ensure I'd lose control over what I built. And from the dates, it looked like it happened right after I left home. I called Grace back immediately. "Who left this?" She hesitated. "The groom's party checked out early this morning. I think one of the assistants might have left it behind." "Daniel." "My sister's new husband." My pulse quickened. If these papers were his, then he had been involved in something connected to my father, maybe even the reason my family turned against me. Suddenly, the missing pieces began to form a shape. When I left 2 years ago, the fight had started over a business deal, one where I was accused of taking an opportunity meant for Emma. But what if the truth was that I had been set up? What if Daniel and my father had been partners, and Emma had been caught in the middle? The thought made my hands tremble. I needed to be sure before I confronted anyone. I spent the evening in my office, the golden light fading into deep blue shadows, reading every page of those documents. And the deeper I went, the more I realized the betrayal I thought had been emotional was also financial. Someone had wanted me out. Someone had wanted to make sure I walked away with nothing. The next morning, I called Emma. She answered after the second ring, her voice softer than yesterday. "Hey," she said, like we had been speaking for years instead of days. "Emma, I need to see you," I said, trying to keep my tone even. "It's important." There was a pause, then a quiet, "Okay." We met again in the hotel's rooftop garden, under the same hanging lights that had witnessed our reunion after the wedding. She looked uneasy, like she could already sense this wasn't about forgiveness. I handed her the folder. These were found in Daniel's suite. She opened it, her eyes scanning the pages. Her lips parted slightly, confusion flickering across her face. "What is this?" she asked. "You tell me," I said, my voice shaking. "It's paperwork tied to Dad's company and mine. My hotel was part of it." There's a clause here that mentions my name and a transfer that was never disclosed to me. Emma frowned deeper, flipping pages faster now. Daniel said he handled some things for Dad's investments, she whispered. I didn't know it was about you. My throat ached. You didn't know, or you didn't want to know? The words slipped out sharper than I intended, but they were years overdue. She looked up, tears gathering in her eyes. I swear, Maya, I didn't. I thought the fight was about you taking a deal behind our backs. I didn't know her voice broke. I could see realization dawning on her, the puzzle pieces rearranging in her mind. She sank onto the bench, clutching the folder like it might explode. Daniel said it was just paperwork. He said it would help Dad protect his investments. I didn't know it was your hotel. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. That's the point, Emma. They made sure you didn't. They used your anger against me to make sure I wouldn't question it. And you were too hurt to see what was really happening. She covered her face with her hands, trembling. Maya, I didn't mean to be part of this. I sat beside her, the anger still burning but mixed now with something sadder pity. I know, but you were. For a long time we sat in silence, the city sounds faint below us. Then she looked at me, eyes red but steady. What are you going to do? I sighed, looking out at the skyline. I don't know. But I can't let them get away with this. Not Dad, not Daniel. Emma bit her lip. You'll ruin them? They already ruined me once, I said quietly. This time, I'm not going to let it happen again. She nodded slowly, as if accepting a truth she couldn't change. Then let me help you, she said suddenly. I turned to her, startled. Why? Because I helped destroy you once. I want to make it right. For the first time in years, her words didn't feel like an apology. They felt like an alliance. I looked at her and saw not the sister who betrayed me, but the girl who used to run barefoot through the fields behind our house, laughing, trusting, believing we could conquer anything together. Maybe we still could. Maybe justice didn't have to mean destroying everything. Maybe it could mean exposing the truth. As we sat there under the fading sunset, I realized something I hadn't before. Revenge wasn't about hurting them back. It was about making them face what they'd done. And this time, I would make sure they did. The next morning felt different. The air outside my window was lighter somehow, but not peaceful, more like the calm before a storm that everyone pretends not to see coming. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the folder again, the weight of it sitting on my knees like a second heartbeat. The truth was now in my hands, and so was the power that came with it. But power was dangerous, especially when emotions were tangled inside it. I wasn't sure if I wanted revenge or just closure. Emma arrived early, carrying her laptop and a folder of her own. I went through Dad's old files last night, she said quietly. There are more documents, transfers. Daniel's name appears in at least 6 of them. My stomach twisted. So it's true, I whispered. She nodded. He worked with Dad for months before the wedding. It looks like he convinced Dad that cutting you out was necessary, said you were becoming a liability. Her voice cracked on the last word. I closed my eyes, breathing through the ache. A liability. That's what my own family thought of me. Not a daughter. Not a sister. just a threat to their comfort. They used me, I said bitterly. Used my silence to build everything they wanted. Emma sat down across from me, guilt clouding her face. We can expose this, she said firmly. We can take it public, show everyone the truth. I hesitated. If we do that, we destroy Dad's reputation. The company, everything he built. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. He destroyed you first. Her words cut deep because they were true. For years, I had built my life around fairness, believing that justice meant balance. But life had never been fair to me. I stared at the city through the window, the streets, the skyline, the people moving below, unaware of the battles others fought in silence. I made my decision. We'll do it, I said. But we'll do it the right way. Over the next few days, Emma and I worked together in secret. Every night after closing hours, we sat in my office surrounded by papers, laptops and files, tracing every transaction and email chain. The deeper we dug, the clearer the pattern became. Daniel had orchestrated everything. He had manipulated our father into transferring shares, hiding assets under shell companies, and even setting up the clause that almost cost me my hotel. It was more than betrayal. It was theft wrapped in family loyalty. One evening, Emma found an email chain that stopped her cold. "Maya," she said, voice trembling, "you need to see this?" I leaned over her shoulder. The email was from Daniel to our father, dated a week before the wedding. Asterisk, once the marriage is official, the remaining shares will transition seamlessly. Maya's claim will be void by then. My breath caught. He had married Emma not just for love, but for access, for control. I could see the truth hit Emma like a wave. Her face went pale, and she backed away from the screen. He used me," she whispered. "All of it. The wedding, the promises. It was about business." I reached for her hand, but she pulled away, shaking. "Emma, no," she said, her voice breaking. "He made me believe you were jealous, made me hate you. And all that time he was the one lying to both of us." Tears streamed down her face, raw and helpless. I wanted to comfort her, but I also knew this was her moment to face what I had faced years ago. "Now you know what it feels like," I said softly. "To be betrayed by the people you trusted most." She looked at me then, eyes red and filled with remorse. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I don't know how to fix this." I took a deep breath. We fix it by ending it. Not with anger, with truth. Together we compiled everything, the emails, the financial trails, the contracts. I reached out to an old journalist friend, someone I trusted from before everything fell apart. Her name was Clara, and she was known for exposing corporate scandals. When I told her I had a story, she didn't hesitate. "Send me the files," she said. "If what you're saying is true, this will change everything." That night, before I hit send, I hesitated. My father's name was on every page. The same man who had taught me to be strong, to fight for what I believed in. Could I really do this to him? Emma watched me quietly. "You don't owe him silence," she said gently. "He took your voice once. Don't let him take it again." I pressed the button. The files were sent. The next few days moved in slow motion. The article was published 3 days later, corporate manipulation and family deceit. Inside, Carter Holdings' hidden betrayal, the story exploded. News outlets picked it up, investors pulled out, and the company's image shattered overnight. I should have felt victorious, but instead I felt numb. The morning after the article went live, I got a call from my father. I let it ring twice before answering. His voice was quiet, tired. "You did this?" he asked. "I did what you never had the courage to do," I said. I told the truth. He sighed, and for a long moment there was silence. Then he said something I never expected. "You were right to walk away. I just didn't want to admit it." My heart clenched. "Then why did you let them destroy me?" He didn't answer. Maybe he couldn't. The silence between us said everything. When the call ended, I felt tears running down my cheeks, not of regret, but release. For the first time in years, I felt free, not because I had won, but because the truth was no longer buried. That evening, Emma came to my office. She looked exhausted, but her eyes were clear. "He's gone," she said softly. "Dad resigned. Daniel left town." I nodded, feeling the weight of it all settle around us. "And you?" I asked. She managed a faint smile. "I'm staying. If you'll have me." I didn't answer right away. I looked around the room, at the hotel that had been my sanctuary, my battleground, my redemption. Then I looked at her, my sister, once my enemy, now my mirror. "You're home," I said quietly. And for the first time, the words didn't feel like forgiveness. They felt like peace. That night, I stood on the rooftop again, the city lights shimmering below. The same place where it had all begun. The pain, the anger, the loss, it had all led to this moment. I realized then that revenge had never been the goal. The real victory was reclaiming myself, my voice, my truth, my family, in whatever form it still existed. Sometimes justice doesn't come with a bang. It comes in silence, in strength, in the decision to never let the darkness define you again. As the wind brushed my face, I whispered to the night, "They refused to invite me to their wedding. But they forgot I own the place." And this time, it wasn't bitterness. It was closure. The days after the storm felt strangely quiet. The hotel returned to its rhythm, guests checking in, staff smiling, the faint sound of piano music drifting through the lobby. But for me, everything had changed. The chaos that had once filled my heart had settled into something calmer, something like peace. I woke early one morning and walked through the empty corridors of the Silver Leaf. Every wall, every polished floor, carried memories of battles fought in silence, the whispered doubts, the moments I almost gave up, the nights I stood by the window wondering if forgiveness was even possible. But now the air felt lighter. For the first time, I wasn't walking with anger. I was walking with purpose. Emma had started helping with some of the hotel's charity projects, using her background in design to bring new life to the place. Watching her move through the lobby, smiling shyly at the staff she had once looked down on, reminded me how far we had come. Sometimes she'd glance at me, a quiet question in her eyes, "Are we okay?" And every time I'd nod. We were more than okay. We were healing. One afternoon, as I sat in my office, Clara called me again. Maya, your story has inspired a lot of people, she said. I've received dozens of messages from women who said your courage gave them strength to speak up. How does that feel? I smiled faintly, staring out the window at the city skyline. Strange, I admitted. I never meant to inspire anyone. I just wanted the truth. That's usually how it starts, she said softly. After the call, I sat there thinking about everything that had happened. The lies, the betrayal, the revenge that turned into redemption. It all felt distant now, like a storm that had passed over me and left behind clearer skies. I thought about Dad sometimes, about whether he regretted what he'd done. Part of me wished I could hate him forever, but another part, the part that still remembered his laughter when I was little, hoped he found his own kind of peace too. Maybe we all deserved a chance to start over, even the ones who hurt us. That night, Emma and I had dinner together in the rooftop restaurant. The same place where she had confessed the truth, now glowing with soft golden lights. The city sparkled below us, alive and forgiving. Do you ever wish things had been different? She asked suddenly. I thought about it for a long moment. Sometimes, I said honestly, but if they had been, I wouldn't have found out who I really am. She nodded slowly, a small smile tugging at her lips. You've always been stronger than me. No, I said gently. I just learned how to survive first. We sat in silence for a while, watching the lights flicker in the distance. It was strange. The very place that had once broken me was now where I felt whole again. Life has a way of circling back like that. Before we left, Emma reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Thank you, she whispered, for giving me a second chance. I smiled softly. We both needed one. Later that night, I walked alone through the empty ballroom, the same one where their wedding had taken place. The decorations were long gone, replaced by the warm simplicity of everyday life. But I could still hear echoes of laughter, music, the rustle of gowns, the weight of unspoken words. I closed my eyes and imagined that version of me again, the woman who stood in the shadows that night, watching her family celebrate without her. I wanted to tell her that it would all be worth it, that the pain she carried would one day turn into power, that she'd rise, not in anger, but in truth. As I turned off the last light and headed toward the door, I whispered to myself, sometimes the best revenge isn't winning. It's healing. Outside, the city glowed under the moonlight, calm and endless. I breathed it in, the scent of rain, of freedom, of beginnings. The silver leaf stood tall behind me, no longer just a hotel, but a symbol of survival, of strength, of home. They refused to invite me to their wedding, but fate had invited me to something far greater, peace. And this time, I wasn't walking away. I was walking forward. Moral of the story: life will always test your strength through betrayal, silence, and loss. But the truth has a strange way of finding its way home. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing yourself over the pain. When others shut you out, let it be the moment you open the door to your own power. Because the best kind of revenge is becoming everything they thought you couldn't be. Months passed, and life slowly began to rebuild itself, piece by piece. The chaos that once surrounded my name faded into distant whispers, replaced by respect, the kind that's earned, not demanded. The silver leaf thrived again, stronger than ever. It wasn't just a hotel anymore. It was a sanctuary for those who'd been broken and found a way to stand again. I began holding monthly workshops there, quiet gatherings where women shared their stories of betrayal, loss, and resilience. Some came with tears, others with anger, but they all left with something I once thought I'd lost forever: hope. Emma stood by my side through it all. She no longer carried the guilt in her eyes when she looked at me. Instead, she carried gratitude. She worked tirelessly, not because she had to, but because she wanted to make something good out of everything that had gone wrong. Sometimes she'd pause while walking through the lobby, just to smile at the sight of it all, the laughter, the light, the second chances. One afternoon, as we stood near the front desk, a young woman approached me. She looked nervous, clutching a worn-out folder to her chest. "Miss Carter?" she asked quietly. "I read about your story. You probably don't remember me, but I used to intern at Carter Holdings." I blinked, surprised. "Oh, I see. How can I help you?" She handed me the folder. "I think you should see this. I found these before I left the company. After everything went public, they tried to bury it." I opened the folder and froze. Inside were copies of confidential letters, new ones. They weren't about me this time. They were about other people. Daniel had done this before. Manipulated, deceived, and stolen from others, hiding behind new companies and false names. My hands tightened around the pages. The story wasn't over. Emma looked at me, eyes wide with concern. "What is it?" "Proof," I said quietly, "that he's still out there doing the same thing." For a moment, silence filled the lobby. The hum of conversation around us faded into the background. Then Emma spoke softly. "What are you going to do?" I took a deep breath, feeling the old fire return, but this time it wasn't born of anger. It was clarity. "I'm going to stop him," I said. "Not for revenge, for justice." Over the next few weeks, I began working with Clara again. Together, we followed the trail: hidden accounts, offshore companies, manipulated investors. Daniel had built an empire of lies, moving from place to place, starting over every time the truth got close. But this time, he wasn't invisible. I had learned too much to let him stay hidden. With every step, I could feel the old me, the one who used to break under betrayal, growing stronger. The hurt had turned into focus, the heartbreak into resolve. We collected everything and presented it to the authorities. And when the day finally came, when the story broke and Daniel's empire crumbled for good, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady, like a storm that had finally cleared the sky. A few days later, I got a message from Clara, asterisk, "It's over. He's facing charges." "You did it again, Maya. You stopped him." I sat in my office staring at those words. A quiet smile touched my lips. Not the smile of revenge, but of closure, the kind that comes when you know the world is a little safer because you chose not to stay silent. That evening, Emma joined me on the rooftop again. The city stretched out beneath us, endless and alive. "You did it," she said softly. "No," I replied, looking out at the skyline. "We did it." She laughed quietly. "You really think people like him ever change?" I shook my head. No, but people like us do. We stop letting their lies define us. The sky turned deep orange as the sun set, the colors reflecting in her eyes. You know, Emma said after a while, I used to think revenge was about winning. But it's not, is it? No, I said. It's about reclaiming what they took, your peace, your power, your story. She smiled. You always find the right words. I looked at her, my sister, my reflection of everything lost and found. No, I said softly. I just live them. That night, as the city lights flickered below, I thought about everything that had happened, the pain, the betrayal, the fight, the healing. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but it was real. And maybe that was enough, because life doesn't promise perfection. It promises growth. It promises that even after you're broken, you can still rebuild, stronger, wiser, brighter. The next morning, I stood at the entrance of the hotel, watching the sun rise through the glass doors. It painted everything in gold. The past didn't feel heavy anymore. It just felt finished. I whispered to myself one last time, they refused to invite me to their wedding. But in the end, it didn't matter, because I built something far greater than a celebration. I built my own beginning, and as I stepped forward into the new day, I knew my story wasn't about what they took from me. It was about what I created despite them. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's proving yourself right. Time has a strange way of healing you when you least expect it. It doesn't announce its arrival or ask for permission. It just slips quietly into your days until one morning, you realize the pain that used to haunt you no longer feels like a wound. It feels like a scar, still there, but no longer bleeding. A year had passed since everything unfolded. The world had moved on, as it always does, but my world had bloomed in ways I never thought possible. The Silver Leaf had become more than a hotel. It had become a story, one that guests whispered about, one that locals admired, and one that inspired many to rebuild their own lives. I often saw strangers standing by the front fountain, reading the little plaque that Emma and I had placed there, asterisk, where betrayal once lived. Forgiveness grew. Every time I read those words, I felt that familiar warmth in my chest, not pride, but peace. Emma was thriving. She had launched her own interior design studio inside the hotel, and it was doing better than either of us expected. Watching her smile, watching her laugh again, made me realize that forgiveness doesn't just set you free, it sets them free too. One afternoon, she came into my office holding a box. "What's this?" I asked, looking up from my desk. "Something I think you should have," she said. I opened it slowly. Inside were old photographs, me, Emma, and Dad, long before the fights, before the company, before everything became complicated. The three of us standing on the beach, sand in our hair, sunlight in our eyes. I stared at the photo, my throat tightening. "Where did you find these?" "In Dad's old study," she said softly. "He's been quiet since everything happened, but he sent me a letter last week. He wanted you to have them." I didn't say anything for a long time. I just held the picture, my fingers tracing the edges like it might crumble under the weight of memory. "He wrote that he's sorry," Emma added quietly. He said he lost sight of what mattered most. I closed my eyes, letting the silence fill the room. I didn't know if I was ready to forgive him completely. Maybe I never would. But maybe forgiveness didn't have to be a grand gesture. Maybe it could be as simple as letting go of the need for an apology. "Thank you," I whispered. Emma smiled, tears glimmering in her eyes. "He's proud of you, you know." "We both are." That evening, after she left, I sat on the rooftop with the photo in my hands. The city stretched endlessly around me, alive, imperfect, beautiful. I thought about Dad, about everything he'd done, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt understanding. We were all just human, flawed, afraid, trying to protect what we loved in the only way we knew how. Sometimes that meant hurting others. Sometimes it meant hurting ourselves. But the truth was, life didn't stop for the broken. It waited for them to rebuild. I looked at the photo again and smiled faintly. "You taught me strength," I whispered to the image of my father. But I learned peace on my own. The wind picked up, soft and cool, brushing against my hair as if it carried a message from the past, a quiet kind of forgiveness. The next morning, I decided to visit him. I hadn't been back to the old Carter estate in years. When I arrived, the garden was overgrown, the house quieter than I remembered. He opened the door slowly, surprise flickering across his face. "Maya," he said, his voice uncertain. I nodded. "Hi, Dad." For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he stepped aside. "Come in." We sat in the living room, surrounded by old books, photographs, and echoes of a life that once felt impossible to return to. He looked older, gentler somehow. "I didn't think you'd ever come back," he said quietly. "I didn't think I would," I admitted. "But I needed to." He looked down at his hands. "I read everything you said in that article. You were right. I was blinded by pride. By fear. You were blinded by control," I corrected softly. "You wanted to keep the family together, but you didn't trust me enough to lead." He nodded, shame in his eyes. "I didn't trust anyone back then. I thought love meant protection. I didn't realize it also meant letting go." The honesty in his voice caught me off guard. For a long time, we sat in silence, both searching for the right words. Then I said, "I don't hate you, Dad. I never really did. I just wanted you to see me." He looked up, his eyes glistening. "I see you now. Stronger than I ever imagined." Something inside me loosened, the last thread of resentment that had held me captive for years. I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. "That's all I ever wanted," I said quietly. We sat there, not as a father and daughter divided by betrayal, but as two souls who had finally found their way back through the wreckage. When I left that day, the sky was streaked with gold, and the air smelled like spring, like beginnings. Back at the hotel that night, Emma greeted me at the door. "How did it go?" she asked softly. I smiled. "Better than I thought. Worse than it could have. But right where it needed to be." She nodded, understanding. We stood there in silence, watching guests move through the lobby, their laughter echoing against the marble. And for the first time, I realized that my story, our story, wasn't one of betrayal anymore. It was one of rebirth. Because sometimes life doesn't give you the ending you expect. It gives you the one you need. I turned to Emma and said, "Let's make this place even bigger. Not just for us, for everyone who's ever been told they weren't enough." She grinned. "The Silver Leaf Foundation?" I nodded. "Exactly." And as the lights of the hotel shimmered behind us, I knew that the story that began with rejection had ended in redemption. They refused to invite me to their wedding, but they couldn't stop me from building a legacy that would outlast every one of them. Because in the end, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's rising so high that even those who broke you have no choice but to look up. Time passed, but the memories of that night stayed vivid in my mind. Not because of the pain anymore, but because of how far I had come. After the chaos of the wedding and the aftermath of Emma's downfall, something inside me shifted. For the first time in years, I wasn't driven by anger or revenge. I was driven by purpose. The hotel business kept growing, and our name, the Carter Legacy, meant something again. But I didn't want it to be just about money or reputation. I wanted it to mean something. That's when the idea came to me, to start something that could transform pain into power. I called it the Silver Leaf Foundation. The name came from a small tree in my hotel's garden, a silver leaf tree that had somehow survived every storm. Just like me. The foundation's mission was simple: to help women rebuild their lives after betrayal, loss, and emotional collapse. I wanted to create a space where no one felt as alone as I did that night when my own sister's wedding was taking place downstairs, without me. When we launched the foundation, people came, not just strangers, but old friends, employees, even guests who had stayed at my hotel years ago. They came with stories, tears, and courage. Emma, too, showed up one afternoon, quietly, without cameras or noise. She looked fragile, humbled. Her arrogance had long melted away. She wanted to help. She told me she'd been going through therapy, trying to fix what was broken inside her. I didn't say yes immediately. I made her wait. I wanted her to understand that forgiveness wasn't a gift, it was something earned. But in time, I saw that she was genuine. I let her volunteer, under supervision at first, then more freely. Slowly, our conversations became less awkward. One day, while packing gift boxes for women in need, she looked at me and said, "You know, I used to think winning meant taking something away from others. Now I see it's about giving something back." I smiled for the first time in front of her in years. That moment didn't erase the past, but it softened it. The Silver Leaf Foundation became our way of healing, not as sisters who had hurt each other, but as women who had learned from their mistakes. We organized workshops, built safe housing, and sponsored education for young girls who had been betrayed by those they trusted most. Every time I walked into one of our centers and saw those girls smiling again, I felt something in my heart loosen, like the chains of old bitterness finally breaking. And though I didn't need validation anymore, one day during a press conference, a reporter asked me, "Maya, if you could go back and change one thing, would you?" I paused. Everyone leaned in, expecting some grand revelation. But all I said was no, because the person I am now could only exist because of what happened then. And that was the truth. Every betrayal, every heartbreak, every sleepless night had shaped me into someone stronger, someone capable of rebuilding not just her own life, but others too. It's been 5 years since that unforgettable wedding. The Carter Grand Hotel now stands as one of the most prestigious names in the city, and the Silver Leaf Foundation operates in 6 countries. People often tell me I'm an inspiration. I don't feel like one. I'm just someone who refused to stay broken. Sometimes I still walk through the Grand Ballroom, the same place where my sister once celebrated her wedding without me. The chandeliers glitter the same way, but the energy feels different now, warmer, more peaceful. One evening, as I was locking up after an event, Emma came in, holding 2 cups of coffee. She smiled softly and said, "For old time's sake." We sat in the middle of the empty ballroom, sipping quietly. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked. I nodded. "Every now and then. But not with anger anymore." She sighed. "I still wish I'd done things differently." I looked at her and said, "We both do. But maybe this, us here now, is how it was always meant to be." She smiled, her eyes glassy. We didn't need to say anything else. The silence between us wasn't heavy anymore. It was healing. Later that night, I went out to the hotel garden, to the silver leaf tree that had inspired it all. The moonlight shimmered off its leaves like tiny mirrors. I placed my hand on its trunk and whispered, "Thank you for surviving with me," because survival wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about growth. It was about learning that sometimes being excluded, betrayed, or forgotten isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of your strength. When I look back now, I don't see a victim or a broken sister. I see a woman who turned her pain into purpose. And maybe, just maybe, that's the best kind of revenge, to live a life so full, so peaceful, that those who once hurt you can only look at you and whisper, "She made it."